There it is. All right, fantastic. We are live. You're getting a little bit of feedback? How you sound? Sound okay? I think we're good.
A little bit of feedback, yeah.
All right, we'll see. Hey, everybody, welcome to, we'll see if this, because this clears up a little bit. Welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads. I think at the moment we're calling it Just One Dad, although there's two of us on the line here, and so we're both dads. So we're still going to stick with the theme of Just Two Dads. I'm Brian Altounian. I'm co-host of this podcast. Joe, my daughter Joe, likes to sign in and say hello every week. Hello, Joe. Great to see you. For those of you who are just joining us for the first time, Just Two Dads is a podcast dedicated to creating a platform for the warriors who are doing amazing work out there in the special needs community. We find that the discussions around those families that have special needs, family members, what we're doing as advocates for that community has reach that transcends that special needs community. So we like to highlight those folks who are doing amazing things. Today's guest is one of those, and I'm excited to jump into that conversation. For those of you who are just joining us for the first time, we're on Facebook. We have our own YouTube channel as well, so please subscribe to our YouTube channel at Just Two Dads. We're on all podcast platforms as well, Apple, Google. Share this with as many people as you like, as you can. We want to create a platform to share with the world this amazing work. So in addition to the podcasts, we're on Pandora, Spotify Radio, and also on WSTX AM radio down in the US Virgin Islands. So the world of the special needs community extends beyond those in just our own family and just our own community. So we want to highlight these amazing people. And today we're so excited because and by the way, for those of you who don't know, Shawn Francis will be joining us shortly. I would say this, Sam, we live in Los Angeles, so traffic is always a question. So we're going to blame it on Los Angeles traffic. But he'll be joining us shortly, and I'm sure he'll come in all winded and ready to go. So it'll be exciting. We'll be hearing from Shawn shortly. But the reason why I'm excited about today's guest is that this conversation that we're gonna have today is going to also tie into a conversation that we had in the very, very beginning days of our Just Two Dads podcast, where we had the amazing Jim and Kathy Gott as our guests, and the work that they started to do. And actually, Kathy suggested that we meet with our guest Sam Yebri today, and so I'm excited to share with you. Sam lives in the Westwood area of Los Angeles, which is, for those of you who don't know, for those of you who can't see on camera, I always have this UCLA thing hanging over my shoulder over here, and it's the home of UCLA. And I always like to rub it into people who have a tie to our rival campus across the city, USC, which is where Sam went to law school. But we love each other, so that's the best part about.
And we're both in the Sweet 16 in
how do you like that?
There you go.
Two Los Angeles schools in the Sweet 16 of this year's NCAA basketball tournament. It's amazing. So we're going to talk to Sam. Sam's a practicing attorney. And he's doing some amazing work in the special needs community, which is what he's going to talk about today. But almost more importantly is Sam's also running for city council in Los Angeles in the fifth district, which covers a pretty large territory. And the challenges that the city of Los Angeles face are no different than challenges that big cities have been facing around the country, especially during the time of the pandemic. So we're excited to hear what Sam has to say. This is not a political show, so I don't think we have to deal with equal time for equal candidates. But Sam's here because of the work that he's doing within our special needs community. So first of all, welcome, Sam. Great to have you.
Thank you, Brian. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, it's amazing. We got a chance to talk a little bit before we went live, and we know some of the same folks, and that makes it kind of exciting. You guys will see, or will hear very early on, that there's an engaging familial feel to Sam. Sam is a dad and of 4 children. This is going to blow you away. 4 children under the age of 8 years old. So any parents who have children, you know how impactful that
could be. Especially during a pandemic, it's been a real challenge.
Oh my gosh, I can only imagine. So Sam, give us a little bit of your OG story, if you will, like your background, how you got into the profession that you're in, and then the work that you're doing, and then, again, to lead you to want to get into local politics here in Los Angeles. Can you give us a little bit of that?
I'll go more than OG. I'll go to the old country. So my family and I moved to Los Angeles when I was a year old as refugees from Iran. And we settled in Westwood, and I went to the local public elementary school, Fairburn, for those who may know it. And from there, went off to Yale and USC for law school, and I was always involved in the community and different things. I got the political bug actually working for Congressman Waxman, who represented Los Angeles in Congress, and also working on a presidential campaign, Bill Bradley for president in New Hampshire in '99 in the snow.
Oh my gosh.
And dated myself a little bit. But then when I came back to LA, I immediately threw myself into issues that are really important, both as when I went to law school and afterwards. Issues of the special needs community were always really close to my heart. I grew up with a close family member with special needs, and we started off as young kids volunteering where we could, and then as I grew older, raising money for causes that were important. As a young lawyer, would volunteer with Betzedek Legal Services, which is the largest nonprofit provider of conservatorships in LA County. I serve on that board now, and continue to grow into opportunities in the special needs community. I served until recently on the board of the Jewish Community Foundation, which is the largest foundation in the Jewish community, and I focus a lot of our grant giving on the special needs and disabled community, and learned a lot about some of the great work that nonprofits were doing. And now I serve on a board of an organization called EDA, which provides housing and supportive services for adults with special needs. And one thing I hope to talk about later today is the work of EDA with building this incredible transformative housing model in the heart of LA, an urban community called the Village, that if it works, we can replicate it nationwide. And by doing that work, I got to learn about all the challenges it is to navigate city government, to build and to help, and learn a lot about the problems. And I want to be a part of the solution to make it easier to build these important housing opportunities. And we're going to talk about employment opportunities, making the city more inclusive. All these things are really important, and the city can have a huge role in tackling those problems.
So first of all, that's amazing. And I'll tell you what we always note, and I would say this for every adult that has a child with special needs. We feel that we're members of a community, that we're involuntary members, right? We are included because of the fact that our children have, special needs. And in my case, I didn't know anybody who had any learning disabilities or really any physical disabilities. I say no. I mean, they were not in my immediate family. I didn't have that. And so, we talk often about the time that we got the diagnosis from our doctors of when our child was diagnosed with some issue, some cognitive issue. For my daughter, she had some learning disabilities and some cognitive processing issues growing up, and she had an IEP from the time she was about 3 years old. And so thrust into this world. Shawn talks a lot about his son, who's now 4. By the way, my daughter, Jo, she's 25 years old and married and living a great life in upstate New York. And, I'm thankful for the efforts that we as parents put into her success. And she's just thriving and beautiful, beautiful girl. Shawn's son, who's 14, is on the autism spectrum. And again, he was thrust into that world. So there are many of us that are sort of involuntary members of this special needs community, and we are always blown away by folks such as yourself who voluntarily participate, support, advocate, and fight for folks in the special needs community. So besides the family member, what was it for you that was the catalyst that had you provided?
I always was taught growing up that you judge society based on how it treats its folks that are most vulnerable, right? And there's something about helping and serving someone who with special needs, developmental disabilities. I mean, the innocence, the purity, sort of it really feels good. And I got hooked on the feeling, right? Is whether it's volunteering or doing an autism walk or doing a gala or whatever it is, or advocating for reimbursement rates to be increased at the regional center. I've been on all different pieces of it, or trying to build housing now and making it easier to do that. I just felt like that there's an important need that needs to be met, and that we need more folks to lean in on it, right? We've had our Me Too moment for women's rights issues. We're having our racial justice moment right now, and I think there's really a need for a disability rights moment too, so that our city needs to be as diverse and incredible Los Angeles is. We can be so much more inclusive. and smarter when it comes to housing, employment, and other things too. So I just got hooked on it as a young person and kind of stayed with me. And I tried to now, as a father of young kids, to include them in some of the work that we do and take them to the programming. It's harder now with the pandemic, but we've always been hands-on in the work and the charity, philanthropic kind of advocacy work we do.
It's amazing. And again, really my hats off to you to, the term inclusion, again, for those of us in the community, it's something that we've been fighting for, be inclusive, right? Think about this process. And those issues that you just talked about are significant issues. The Me Too movement, the civil rights issues have always been, at the forefront of, again, equality, equal based kinds of consideration. And even though we have the Americans with Disabilities Act, and we've got a lot of that built in a way, it feels like there's a little bit of complacency at the government level to do more than what the ADA initially set out. So inclusion is a part of the conversation that we have on a pretty regular basis. And it almost seems that most of our guests are fighting for or working on some sort of inclusion programming. So I think that's amazing. And those things that you just hit on, employment, housing, I am anxious for you to talk about the village.
You talked about fighting for inclusion. I had a roundtable with CEOs of nonprofits who work in the space, and I was proactive in reaching out to them to hear about their issues and come up with ideas. And they said, we don't have lobbyists. Folks in our community generally don't vote in big numbers, so we're ignored by politicians or by government, right? And so it takes lawsuits sometimes to get the attention of schools and governments and systems, right? And it shouldn't be that way. So I think now there's a reorientation of what we can do because we're trying to be inclusive in every aspect of our society and our city. And I think this is an important conversation that we're having. And you're the tip of the spear in having this forum. And I hope that others can realize how important this is. And there's a win-win when we talk about employment opportunities. When we include folks with unique abilities in that setting, I think it's a win-win, right? I know as a young person when I volunteered at a camp or different ways, and it stuck with me, right? And and I think we want to create that service culture that everyone is doing something for someone else, and the special needs community can really lift everyone up together, because it's really something that the beauty and the purity of the community is really important.
I completely agree, and again we featured filmmakers and those that are building gateways for young adults in this community to have a foray into the worlds of entertainment and music and into aspects of life where the doors have not really been opened. So I admire you. I definitely let's launch into the community village, because I think all of those things that you talked about were important, and as a model that can be duplicated and spread out all over the country and the Virgin Islands. We like to include our family in the Virgin Islands as well, but really anywhere. How did that process come about? We'll throw up on the screen for people to see the Cornerstone Village, right?
Yeah,
so talk about that a little bit, Sam.
I think we all know that there's a massive need for housing in general, for affordable housing, supportive housing in Los Angeles and in every big city. But not enough folks talk about the need for adults with special needs, and to create a model that there's inclusivity, independence, and that's really the idea behind the village, is that it sets a new standard for living in the heart of Los Angeles, that creates opportunities for folks to live an inclusive and independent lifestyle. So the village, it's built on the land has been purchased, and we're going through the entitlement stage right now. It's a nonprofit developer doing it that's associated with the nonprofit ETA. There's going to be 64 units of housing, mixed use, which means there's going to be retail on the ground floor, so folks who live in the building can actually work there. There's going to be a food court type first floor. It's going to be really incredible and beautiful, and it's really going to be innovative. So a garden setting for events at the top floor. Then there's going to be studios, one bedrooms and 2 bedrooms as well. Supportive services on site, and it's going to empower the folks who live there with folks who have intellectual and developmental disabilities to be able to live independently and create opportunities for them to live in an autonomous lifestyle. And it's really a revolutionary new model. So it's obviously this is expensive in the heart of Los Angeles. There's some big leaders like Kathy Gott who have led the charge to raise the money privately, and then there's the government side, is how do we navigate the available public funds, the tax credits, to make this work, and then navigate everything that people have to navigate to build housing in Los Angeles. And it's been very, very challenging. And I've learned a lot. And the system is broken, right? It should be the easiest and fastest type of housing project to build, supportive housing, senior housing for folks with disabilities. And it's not. It's the most complicated, it's the most expensive, and it takes the longest. So you saw the website, cornerstonevillage.org. I hope folks can learn more. And we're looking for financial support. We're looking for expertise on issues, and ultimately residents. It's going to be this incredible model that we hope to replicate.
So what's the biggest governmental challenge to that? What do you find is the biggest hurdle, the biggest piece of red tape that you've got to cut through for this? Is there any one?
Yeah, no, there's several. On the front end, there are tax credits and financing sources, but there's 4 or 5 of them. You have to navigate all of them, and you have to hire lobbyists and lawyers to help you navigate it. And then the entitlement process is complicated too. There's red tape to get your density bonuses to be able to build taller and with more units, and you have to navigate in Los Angeles' specific situation. There's the DWP, and there's all different rules, and it's been challenging to navigate neighbors and some of those issues that are at play too, and dispelling some of the ideas of what it means to live next to a community like this, and that takes outreach. You got to hire folks to do that outreach. We have incredible volunteers, but you need a team to do that. So there's challenges in every direction. So obviously land is really expensive. This was privately purchased. The hope is the city or the county would be able to create opportunities for the land can be leased. So this can be done a lot more affordably in the future. But in every direction, it's expensive, it's slow, and it's going to be a 4 or 5 year process, and tens of millions of dollars to get this done. But it's going to be transformative for the neighborhood. It's going to be almost like a town hub in the Pico Robertson area, because it's going to have that retail, the event space, and then office and for some of the supportive services as well. It's really going to be transformative.
Did the pandemic slow this process down at all for you guys, or are you just charging ahead?
Charging ahead in terms of everything we can control. Obviously, raising money, things have slowed down during the pandemic. Government has been slower, although you think there may be some ways to energize and move things forward, given that we need to build housing. But things are slower, and we're hopeful that the city will prioritize projects like this that really should be prioritized. We need more housing for folks in the special needs community, and the numbers are astronomical. The need for folks to live independently is really massive.
Well, and it brings up a really good point. The special needs community, for sure. Housing of this nature it's breakthrough. It's really it's pretty significant. But in the city of Los Angeles, I would say a lot of people would say, the homeless crisis has been a big challenge, and finding affordable housing within the city limits, the city of Los Angeles has been difficult at best. Again, talk about that a little bit, because I know it'll get us into our next. We don't have to. I don't want to leave the village yet, but it will be part of our next conversation, which is how do we change how the government of the city of Los Angeles is operating. But how is housing in general being handled for affordable housing in the city?
Sure. So right now the model for building affordable housing is to exchange density bonuses, more units, taller buildings in exchange for some percentage of what gets built to be affordable. So it's 8, 10, 12%. So let's say something can only be 2 stories. You can now build 5 or 6 stories as long as 10 or 12% of the units in the building are now affordable. But the system doesn't work. The rest of the units will be luxury or market rate. So it's very expensive or things that are affordable. If you're in the middle tier, if you have some income, you're not kind of at the level of poverty, you're not really getting benefited by that. But there's other issues too. So those affordable units are not publicly transparently available, so folks can find out how to apply for those units if you do qualify. There's a lack of enforcement and auditing. So if there's an affordable unit available in this area, the city's not making sure that the right people get it. And we find out that a lot of those units are vacant, they're empty, or developers are giving them to family members or people who work for them, and it's not really creating the public benefit that we want. And then for the special needs community, a huge issue is that individual special needs need to be officially included and designated as a population in the criteria for affordable housing projects, as opposed to just folks may not be able to show on tax returns what they earned, and this is especially if you're dependent or other things like that, it's really a challenge. And there's a push in the advocacy space to designate folks with special needs and with other disabilities to be prioritized for those units. And and that's really very, very important. And then the other piece of it is rent subsidies, right? If you do have a unit that's affordable, you now, because of the pandemic or otherwise you can't afford to pay it, eventually the eviction moratorium will go away, and you're in a horrible situation where you could be evicted, right? And both that unit becomes market rate, but also you're stuck potentially becoming homeless, right? Which is going to be obviously a huge issue in Los Angeles and state and nationally for all of us. And we need to do more in terms of rent subsidies. It's a tremendous ROI for the city and for our tax dollars to help someone stay in that affordable unit, that rent-controlled unit, and not prevent them from falling into homelessness.
It does seem. I mean, there are other cities, and I think I may have talked about this when we had Kathy on as a guest. But I know in the city of Austin, Texas, I have family in Austin. They've created something also called the Village, right? Community First Village, for the homeless population, where they're sort of micro homes or smaller homes, and it's done almost like where everybody contributes. It's like I don't want to call it a commune, but for lack of a better word, everybody contributes to the community in exchange for the ability to stay there. And that model hasn't really. I've talked to the founder of the company. I say, hey, why don't we do that in LA? Why aren't we doing this in big cities? And he said, yeah, I'm game. We just need somebody to lead the charge. So I know that there are models for this. And I was going to ask you if there was a model for the Cornerstone Village anywhere else. These models of successful plans around particular communities within the much larger city community. Are there other models for that's, I guess, I always accuse Shawn of asking like 20 questions in one question, and here I am doing it. So let's break it down. He's going to appreciate the fact that I'm self-aware, and so that I've acknowledged that.
You're not going to ask a compound question and get objected to like a deposition, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. I'm the first one to criticize him, and then of course I do it. So let's talk about this first. Is there a model that exists similar to the Cornerstone Village that in other parts of the country, or is this really going to be the first one?
So in Los Angeles, there's group homes that operate some of them. There's some co-op models. There's used to be some boarding care type facilities. Other cities, they have similar kind of housing projects. I think this is really transformative, one of a kind for Los Angeles to have something of this scale and this caliber. It's going to be beautiful, world-class services on site, amenities. It's independent apartment living for adults with special needs with vocational opportunities on site in the heart of an urban area, right? And
it's amazing.
With different types of housing, in terms of studio 1 and 2 bedrooms. So it is really unique. And there are some smaller scale type projects around the country, but this is the first time in Los Angeles. Yeah.
And then do you have plans to make this the model for then doing this in other cities or other parts of LA and other states?
That's the hope. It is a revolutionary new model. It's expensive and it's privately funded, and we need to find partners, nonprofit or government, to make this easier the next time and cheaper and faster the next time around. So the hope is it can be replicated so we can help a whole lot more folks.
Is it a profitable venture? Is it, I mean, overall, is the idea that it's a for-profit venture, or is it operating more as a nonprofit venture?
It's nonprofit owned, it's nonprofit operated. There will be government funded for the services on site through the regional center. But with the rents, the goal is that it will cover its cost, right? The goal is not to constantly be fundraising to make this survive. Is that the rent be operated like a business so that it works and it can be sustainable.
I've worked with nonprofit organizations, and people have this misconception that if you have a nonprofit that you're not allowed to make a profit. The reality is, any profit is basically just put back into the organization. It's not distributed out, which would keep it as a nonprofit. Right. I knew some people who ran nonprofit organizations, and they were run poorly, and so they were like, well, there's a reason why we're nonprofit, and usually it was management. But in this particular case, I can see that. And so then the need for developing a model that can be duplicatable. We need a large, well-funded.
Right. There's the rents. There's going to be the services on site. There's going to be ground floor retail, which will create revenue, and event space that could be rented. So there's different fee components to it. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. And how about if you don't mind, I'm fascinated by it because I remember when Kathy first mentioned it. I love the concept, and as a model for again addressing everything that you just talked about, housing, employment opportunities, services, independent living. It's so fascinating to me. So we don't have to carry on too much on this, but just curious, retailers, has there been is it really been like, open, like many retailers are clamoring to be in this? Is it a select kind of a retailer? And again, I know you can't give away who you're talking to necessarily, but.
Yeah, so we're in negotiations of leases, and we're looking at a lease right now for an operator. The building is still in the entitlement stage. We haven't built it yet, but we're looking at operators and who get it. I think they realize that this is really going to be a unique business that's going to and the community will need to support it and get behind it and rally behind it. And we think that the community really will. And this brings us to kind of the topic of employment, right? I think we all know with some modest accommodations, folks with disabilities can be among the most valuable and productive employees for any business, and also sort of for morale and for uplifting for a business that makes a lot of sense, and it could be a win-win, right? The hope is that more large employers will take advantage of this, but I think it's also incumbent on government to lead by example. In the city of Los Angeles, being one of the largest employers in the entire state, can lead by creating more programs to employ folks with disabilities, with special needs. It's obviously a challenge, especially now with the pandemic, and especially with sort of the budget crisis that we have, and some of the civil service rules that any government is subject to. But it's doable, and it's going to be a win-win, and something that I intend to champion.
I love that, and hats off to you. It's such a huge thing. I really wish you so much success with this, and we're gonna keep talking about it. We'll put stuff up on our website. We're gonna put so for those that are not seeing us on video, it's thecornerstonevillage.org. I'll put it up on the screen one more time for those that can see us, the cornerstonevillage.org. Go and check this out, see what their plans are, see what they're doing. It really is amazing. And as a model for our young adults who can live independently. And again, my daughter, who had some special needs challenges prior to being married, she was living on her own. She, our doctor told us that, she would never drive, she would never graduate high school, she'd need assisted living her whole life. For 18 months, 2 years old, parents, we were like so distraught, not knowing what the future held, and yet she has surpassed every one of those expectations and limitations that were imposed by the folks in our medical profession, that just don't just. I think there's so many more people who tell our kids what they cannot do as opposed to what they can do. So I love the fact that you're creating an opportunity for that. And I think that every community should have this. I think this, I'm a big fan of the concept of empathy and love at any time, but especially now, as the pandemic has created this opportunity for us to see caring for our neighbors and for our community is so significant, such an important role. And that's what that Cornerstone Village is going to do for that community and that West Los Angeles community in that particular location as well. Sam, what a great thing that you guys are doing. And I'm hoping that we see these all over the city and really beyond. So that's fantastic. So let's talk about how that transitions, because the confluence of those issues that you deal with city, I'm sure city, state, and county, county, and state governments probably exposed some shortcomings in how our city is operated, and that has kind of launched you into the next phase of your professional career. Yeah, you want to talk about your
so you talk about some of the big issues that are affecting Los Angeles and every big city, like homelessness, income inequality, police reform, and public safety, that balance that needs to be struck, and the COVID recovery and economic recovery. But the special needs kind of set of issues really brought all this to light in terms of the need for housing in a smart, sensible way to build these units for folks who really need it, and employment opportunities that the city can do a lot to incentivize through job training and through other incentives. The city has a Department of Disabilities, but it could do a lot more in terms of conditioning businesses to make this really a priority for them, and also the city itself. So my wife and I, about pre-pandemic, about a year and a half ago, started thinking about our future in Los Angeles and some of the current concerns we face, and we decided to double down and to really decide to tackle these issues and make this our mission to make Los Angeles a wonderful, livable place for all of us, for everyone in the city. And it starts with the homelessness and affordable housing crisis, and it continues with making sure that our neighborhoods are safe and reform policing in a really smart way and quality were exposed. And there's a real need to build back stronger and smarter and help our businesses and help our tenants and balance a lot of the issues that we face in the city. Yeah.
Oh, that's all?
Yeah, right.
Right. And
that's what it feels. The local issues are the issues that really matter, right? That affect our lives on a daily basis, right? And that's what really intrigues me. And I love the city. I love LA and the opportunity to serve. Given my story as a refugee, and now my being a dad of 4 little kids, and the city that I want them to inherit.
Correct.
This is, I feel like I'm called into service, and I'm eager to lend whatever private, nonprofit, and civic experience that I have to this role.
And so you worked for Congressman Waxman, and you worked on a presidential campaign. What other eras of politics have you done? Have you been involved in? What are the things?
So it's a lot of the nonprofit work that brought me to this. I'm serving on the board of Vet Legal Services. I serve on the board of this nonprofit and special needs community, ETA. I was civil service commissioner for the city of Los Angeles, overseeing personnel decisions for our city for 4 years under Mayor Viragosa from 2010 to 2013. Been involved in a lot of local issues as well in Westwood, on the board of our local library and the board of our homeowners association. Been involved on a broad range of issues, including public safety. I served on our city attorney's gun violence prevention task force, which is now we're back in the epidemic stage of gun violence again, and it's up almost 100%. And it's all these issues, kind of all of these nonprofit experiences, civic experiences, plus my private sector experience, being a litigator in private practice, owning a small law firm with employees, and understanding what it means to run a business and keep it afloat during this difficult time. And we'll bring all those experiences to the fold here. And I think we can't leave government at this moment to the same old folks to run it. The status quo is not working. All you have to do is walk down the streets in the city of Los Angeles and really just see the city's really hurting in a lot of fronts. So we think we need new ideas, and I'm excited to bring some of those ideas forward.
Well, I think that's fascinating. And I think, again, the one thing about the pandemic is the private sector has evolved. The private sector continues to evolve. And, in Los Angeles, the entertainment industry, we're constantly changing, how we do business, how we operate. And the public sector doesn't seem to have have evolved with the times. We're still, like, to your point, same old. We still have the same issues, and frankly, I think it's a thankless job, no matter what position you take in local government. There's so many factions. There's so many communities that need to be served, and it's almost like you can't keep everybody happy, and so you compromise quite a bit. Can we talk about a little bit about politics? Again, this is not really a political show, but just because it's topical, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's the conversations over the last year with the election from November, and then looking at things like, for lack of a better word, I hate the expression, defund the police, since it's a misnomer that people don't really seem to understand properly. What is your feeling about now in the city of Los Angeles? We've got a new chief of police, and how would you see the changes going on with police reform, and how we can utilize community services and support services to supplement what the police are doing? I realize, again, it's a compound question there.
Yeah, no, I think what you're getting, I understand what you're getting at. So when you explain to folks what the defund the police and generally the objectives are, if you define it as reorienting and restructuring policing to focus on certain roles and take some of that money to invest in underserved communities, there's kind of broad support for that. If you talk about abolishing or dismantling police or kind of slashing budget by 50%, there's not support for that generally. And I think most folks would like to see a police force that's more accountable, that tackle police violence and police bias with more training and holding folks more accountable. But at the same time, folks don't want their neighborhoods to be less safe, right? They want when they call 911, God forbid they need to, but if they do, they expect the police officers to show up responsibly. And at the same time, if there's a real appetite to examine every aspect of what an LAPD officer does. Does a LAPD officer really need to respond to certain calls, like traffic stops or mental health calls. I was talking to a LAPD officer, and it was interesting that they're the ones who have to decide whether someone should be subject to a 51, 53-day hold if they're a threat to themselves or someone else. I'm not really trained to do that. It really should be the role of a mental health professional in addition to an LAPD officer, not in place of LAPD officers. And there's other calls too, right? There in terms of noise disturbances or other things that are not necessarily violent or criminal or dangerous. There are some models in different cities. There's models in Oregon that the city's trying to replicate and use some pilot programs to. And if those work, I think there's a real appetite to completely reimagine how policing is done in the city. For me, as long as we keep our neighborhood safe, right? I think that's sort of the core responsibility of city government is to provide basic services and to keep its residents safe. So I think we can do that. They're not mutually exclusive, right? Improving policing and keeping folks safe are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah. Well, and in fact, blending the two conversations for our special needs communities, having our police force have some understanding of, when they encounter somebody who has some special needs issues, that there's, you've heard so many of these horror stories where there was a misunderstanding because a police officer didn't know how to recognize the signs of somebody who perhaps was on the autism spectrum or challenges, right? So how do is that part of the conversation as you see it, education and that type of thing for our police
part
force?
Education and training for the police force, the 9,500 or so police officers in LAPD, but it's also for certain calls mental health professionals might be the ones, or other professionals need to be the ones making those calls with police officers, right? And the city's going through evaluating how are those calls, 911, 311, handled, and how are those processed? I mean, it's a really important issue, right? That someone makes a call and there's and you have to get the right information to make the judgment call in terms of who responds. And also, I think that the city has incredible neighborhood councils and homeowner associations and neighborhood groups that want to be partners with the city in a lot of this work in terms of neighborhood safety and homeless outreach and all this and all the different challenges facing our city. And I think there's everyone could be trained better and educated better to identify the signs of someone who might not be dangerous and might not actually have mental health issues, but just may have some special needs and how to address those in a really responsible and compassionate way.
I think that sounds reasonable, and that's an ideal situation. I would love to see that change occur. Let me throw you for a loop on another one, because this is another big issue, not just in the city of Los Angeles, but now in the past year. The issue around education and homeschooling and this rush to get children back to school campuses, at the tail end of their school year, in the special needs community, having some respite from home. Most of our special needs children have difficulty in doing Zoom training and remote education. So I know that special needs community is putting a big push on trying to get children, back, at least some face-to-face education. But in general, there seems to be pushback on, for neurotypical children to get back on the campus, especially these in Los Angeles Unified School District. For those that don't know, it's a massive behemoth of an organization, and campuses are jammed with, a lot more students per teacher than I think in other parts of the country. What's your feeling, or I'm asking you, there's some campaign questions for you, Sam.
Yeah.
But what's your feeling about about this rush right now to get back onto campus here in April before the end of this particular school year?
So it's not an LA City issue. LAUSD has its own board and its own leadership. I think all of us ideally would like to see kids back in school as soon as possible. I think they also want us to make sure it's safe for them and for the teachers and staff all around. I think there's a real appetite there was a real appetite to reach that deal, and I'm really happy to see that that deal has been struck, and there's working out the kinks and timing, and anytime the kids are in school is better than kids being at home, especially folks who are underserved, and especially kids who have some real challenges, who need more than what a parent can provide at home, and it's really a challenge, right? I know for kids with special needs to try to Zoom, it's impossible, right? And
so difficult.
It is so difficult. And then for all kids, there's socialization and supportive care and hot meals. There's a lot of things that a school provides more than just traditional education that is really important, especially for younger kids. My kids are younger, but I know they're at the delicate stage, learning how to read and learning how to kind of fall in love with school, and it's been a challenge. So I'm hopeful that this hybrid model that's going to be rolled out in the next month or so, month plus, is successful, and there aren't no outbreaks, and it works, and then we can continue to ramp up, and hopefully by the fall or whenever safe, we can get folks back to some normalcy.
Back to whatever that means. and I think, I mean, it's interesting because I remember, there was a time professionally where companies were, they really don't want their employees to do a lot of remote work or work from home, and they thought that productivity was down. And then in the last year, they're like, everybody work from home. And it seems like a hybrid model, half remote, half in office, or half remote, half on school campus, seems to be one of those things that could be efficient. But the challenge is if you've got children who are on a hybrid model, and both the parents are back to work full time, then you've got a child care issue.
Yes.
In that schedule. That's a whole nother set of challenges, right? With that whole concept.
It brings up the issue you mentioned earlier in terms of the private sector changing and government trying to catch up, and that's really the city and all cities need to figure out how to navigate a new economy, right? There are going to be changes to the office, to the retail space, and people are not going to be working the same ways and commuting the same ways. And if offices start emptying out and a lot of businesses don't come back in terms of retail, restaurants, we have to figure out how to, what do we do with that, right? And if that one or two dominoes fall, entire neighborhood could be affected, right? We got to figure out how to revitalize. On the west side, in this part of Los Angeles, there's a game changer coming, which is a subway to Beverly Hills and Century City and Westwood Village. That's going to really create an opportunity to revitalize these neighborhoods. And there's some really creative ways to adaptively reuse office and retail and some other commercial properties for housing or to create mixed-use opportunities. So, and technology is a big aspect of it too. Cities, especially Los Angeles, have historically been really slow to respond to Airbnb, Uber, scooters, and e-bikes, right? And have regulations to understand it. So, I think there's going to be some tech booms coming too in terms of new innovation, and we got to be ready for it and be proactive. And part of it is housing. And there's Shawn.
And Shawn has come in just perfect time. Can you hear us, Shawn?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Welcome, buddy. Yeah, great to see you. Great to hear you. We're just launching into just reforming the city. Technology and schools and private sector.
Changing the world.
Just changing the world. That's all. Which
been enlisted to run for mayor, Shawn. So
I have been enlisted to run for mayor.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic.
Wow, that's good. I'm looking forward to seeing the portion of the show that I wasn't here to be a part of. So
it's good. We talked a lot about you because I've been rambling, and I mean that in the sweetest way, of course. But just on this point, we'll finish this point, and then Shawn, we'll bring you into this conversation, because I think one of the challenges that most people are finding now in the work from home and school from home settings is, to your point, Sam, the technology still seems to be stuck in 2000, and by the way, Y2K version of technology, where I don't know if our bandwidth can handle it. I don't know if the infrastructure is in place. It feels like, I can't tell you, I have a 13-year-old who's in middle school in LAUSD, and he finds challenges staying online, staying connected, dropping calls, the teachers drop off. And so it seems to be a really big challenge. If this is the wave of the future or some hybrid form, which definitely don't have the technology infrastructure in this city to handle it.
But other cities do. There's a broadband that other cities have rolled out publicly, making it cheap or free, and obviously, and the broadband issue has shown a lot of inequality in the city too, right? If you're in an underserved community, not having access to Wi-Fi or good technology or computer, that means you may not be able to. Your kid may not learn, and you may not be able to work, and I think there's a real net need to narrow that gap and figure out how to use technology to do that.
Just real quick, how big a gap is that? Because Brian and I always talk about this. I'm sure you guys might have covered it. We always talk about empathy and being childlike and not childish, and that means accepting people as they are. That means stepping in other people's shoes. But it's a fight to remain conscious as to what other people may be going through. So if you have internet that's reliable and it's on more than one device, you got a roof over your head, and you're not wealthy, you're not struggling, though, that's your experience. And if you're not careful, you don't stop to think about what it's really like to be in other people's shoes. So I asked this with a deep desire to know and sincerity, which is, what is the gap like? Because you assume that most people that are, most children that are in school, regardless of age, have access to decent internet, because you see homeless people that have phones and things like that. I mean, I always wonder what each person's situation is. What, if anything, do you know about that?
Yeah, so it's not necessarily a city issue. It's more LAUSD with respect to education. I know that the school district has invested a lot in technology, so making sure that kids got laptops early on in the pandemic and hotspots as necessary. So I don't have all the data. I know it was a pretty early kind of focal point, because it was that inequality was pretty transparent on day one, right? And the kids not being able to zoom in is a pretty easy statistic to show, and where they live, and right. So that's pretty easy, and I think it's been addressed, but obviously we can do better. But going back to your point about empathy and compassion, it goes back to an earlier conversation today about employment, right? Is if we can employ more folks in the special needs community, I think the ripple effects are going to be massive, right? And when you are, I think it'll change the way that people interact with each other. I think sort of create a more compassionate society. And I was telling Brian about sort of some of my origin stories of just volunteering as a young kid in camps, or raising money, camps for kids with special needs, or raising money for causes, walks and the like, and just getting hooked, because you realize that there are bigger issues than you, and you can make a difference, and it sort of grounds you as a person. So that's one of the parts of the win-win to create more employment opportunities for folks with special needs.
What kind of adjustments have to be made? Because I'll get into it at another time, but my reason for being here as late as I am is, related to my son. He's 14 and a half. And so one of the things we're thinking about is that, okay, what's his level of independence going to be? If I'm an employer and I'm not familiar with the special needs community, and I like the idea of employing members of the special needs community, young adults, in various ways, regardless of my industry, how much concession does one have to make in order to have like a job IEP for for someone with special needs? Is there a great challenge? Do I need to cut back? Because again, this is me stepping in those shoes of someone that's not a member of the community. Like, well, look, am I going to be able to have my business thrive and everything, and have someone that can perform these jobs? I mean, does that depend on the industry as to how much catering one needs to do to the employee or potential employee with special needs, or do you have any idea?
Yeah, no, I think it depends on the industry, right? If it's entertainment industry versus service versus kind of aspects, I think it's professional, right? It depends. I try to look at it from like the incentives approach, right? Charlie Munger said, "Show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcomes." If we want more folks with special needs and developmental disabilities to be employed, right? What's it going to take for the private sector? The government sector is one thing, right? If we can navigate some issues, the government can mandate that each department does certain things. We want the private sector, right? Big employers. If we want studios, if we want the big tech companies that have big footprints, and if we want the big grocers and all these things, what will it take, right? How do we incentivize that? Is it economic, right? You can pay these folks a little bit less on the scale. We'll give them priority for contracts. We've all heard about sort of, if you're women-owned or minority-owned, you get certain benefits from government contracts. What if you want a disability front and you're more likely to get a contract, right? I think there's creative ways, and I'm certainly not an expert. I'm just curious and will be tenacious about that. There's ways to get the private sector to view this as a win-win. Part of it's good PR, but I think there's an economic argument too that could work, and I think there's a way to do that.
Yeah, and it's funny because the question popped into my head right in the middle of this banter, and as I'm saying it, I said it right as it came in, and I was like, I wonder how many conversations are taking place in businesses, in civic areas and cities and things like that, where we're thinking about specific industries. Because I know off the top of my head, you mentioned entertainment. I'm not sure if you and Brian talked about that, but I know that Brian has had other conversations with other people, especially with his experience in entertainment, that there are some positions that it's very advantageous for people, certain people with disabilities working in entertainment, as far as technology and things like that go. But that's probably a very great thing to think about, especially should you win your seat on city council and start having these conversations with, okay, let's identify this industry, this person with this challenge and this gift or ability, so to speak, would be a good fit for that industry, and start having specific conversations with regard to industry and needs and things of that sort. So that might be something to think about, especially if we find out that you've won your seat.
Yeah, and I think we need to do both. We need to be specifically targeting industries. We also need to change the narrative, right? And Brian and I were talking about this a little bit too, is sort of including disabilities in the diversity, equity, inclusion conversation. We need the disability rights community generally doesn't have its lobbyists and it's not big voting bases, but it needs to have a louder voice and more champions, and it be included in that conversation, right? There needs to be a moment so that folks with these kind of unique abilities can also be included in these kind of government approaches to solving these big problems. So I do part
definitely
of the conversation too.
Definitely.
Yeah, there's so many issues and so many challenges. But as we've talked about them, as we kicked off this conversation at the very beginning, if those challenges that seem to be right in our face for the special needs community have, they're transcendent to other communities. So I think you're right, Sam. If we can focus on those things that are important and inherent in what we need in the special needs community, it's going to have a broader impact. You've officially launched your campaign and for the city council, and that election is going to be in 2022, correct? Is that right?
That's right.
Fantastic. And what are you doing now? Like, is there a time? Thank you. For those of you who aren't seeing us, Sam has his own website too, by the way, sam4la.com, SAMFORLA.com. Go and see that website. He put a lot of his issues in and where he stands on all of these things. It's up there. It's great, great background on you as well, Sam. So, but are you officially in campaign mode? Does it start officially next year? How does that process work?
Yeah. Well, thank you for the shout out. Yeah, we're in campaign mode. I'm spending a lot of time talking to folks. I was mentioning that the special needs issues are really important to me, and it's where I lead with that in my sort of why I'm doing this as well. But it's a big part of some of the issues that I care about, and it intersects with housing and employment and the kind of city we want to live in. Raising money, earning endorsements, doing all types of forums and conversations already, and from all throughout the district. And this is really largely the West Side seat plus a little part of the Valley as well, in Sino and Sherman Oaks. And I think there's a real appetite for change. People are focusing on local issues if they haven't before. Really, given the homelessness crisis and this crisis of policing and public safety, I think there's a real moment for folks to dig in, and it's exciting. And I'm enjoying the conversations, and I will certainly keep you posted on our progress. And I'm excited. Hopefully, I'll be back and we can talk more about some of the ideas I'm rolling out that could be relevant to moving our city forward, both on special needs issues, but issues at large.
Well, the thing I love the most is that the current councilman has reached his capacity of term limits. So whatever happens next year, there's going to be a new city council person in that seat, and we are huge fans of anybody who takes the special needs issues at heart and puts them at the forefront. So we are rooting for you, Sam, because we know that you're already involved and engaged with the Cornerstone Village and with such amazing folks like the Gotts and others that we're rooting for your success. So this has been an awesome conversation. We always say the hour goes by so quickly as we're having these conversations. Well, especially today for Shawn. So I'll say one thing, and then Shawn, you can wrap us up here. But the pervasive theme today is something that that we talk about a lot here, which you mentioned here a second ago. It really is about empathy, compassion, and love, and that is ultimately what we're trying to see in all of our communities. I think if we can look at our neighbors and think about the things that make us, alike more than the things that make us different, the world's a different place. So I thank you for spending the time with us. We are, as I said, we're rooting for your success. We would love to have you back. We're going to track your activity. If there's stuff that you would like to talk about that is specific to this community that you'd like to come back, you have a platform here and a channel to come back at any time and talk. And if we can help rally a community behind your efforts, I know that the efforts that you're going to be focused on as far as this community is concerned is going to be a model for other places around the country. And as I said, even we talk about this as the U.S. Virgin Islands as a location as well. Anything that we're doing programmatic here, we want to have be something that we can put in other places such as the Virgin Islands. So I want to personally thank you for taking the time. It's been a great conversation. And anyways, I wish you a ton of luck. Shawn, you've come in and didn't get a chance to talk much today, but
that's okay. Hopefully, I made added value and didn't just show up or put Sam in a position to add value.
Significant impact as always.
Two things. One, I got a text message from a friend and client who happens to also be a teacher with LAUSD, and just said, "Hey, the district LAUSD did provide, Chromebooks and Wi-Fi hotspots and all kinds of stuff for the students, but pretty much, verifying what you stated, which is that sometimes there are glitches in the technology, and that's one of the things that, that seems to have taken place. But you mentioned that the current city councilman has reached his limit, so to speak, and change is about to come. So I'm going to close with, before I, reach out to the audience with my closing words, the closing question I'll ask you, because we think about change and the ability to step in one's shoes and the ability to evolve. When we think of that, it brings us to this question, which is, tell us, if you will, Sam, of one belief that you held dear, deeply and strongly, that you now no longer hold true.
I think when we see big problems, we don't think that one person can make a difference. And when I talk to amazing people all around the city who are focusing on issues, and meeting the two of you and everything you're doing, two of you are changing the world. And there's a Jewish value that says if you change one life, you change the world. And I think we're all sort of cynical, and I was in politics. What's one candidate going to do, or what one little bit of change? But I really do think that if all of us dig in and do a little bit more, we can really change the world, one step at a time, and one life at a time. And we don't have to be cynical. We can do this together. Link arms and don't accept the status quo as it is. We should view the world as it should be. And let's go be tenacious and go change the world.
I love that. Are you saying that once upon a time you didn't quite think that way, that you were closer to cynical, and that it's changed?
Yeah. Look, I think even when we have a new president, let's say President Obama comes in, and 8 years later, we don't see that big difference in certain ways. And you're like, what's changed, right? Or you have a new mayor who promises certain things, and things don't change. And you're just sort of fed up with it. And I wasn't going to be a candidate. I never thought I was going to be a candidate until really recently, when I said, why not me, right? The status quo is going to be the same unless people like you and I, normal people, come in and take control of our government and bring some common sense, and bring our nonprofit and our life experience and our private sector experience. And it's been, I don't know how it's going to be received, and the reception's been incredible. We're off to an incredible start in fundraising, endorsements, and press, and by every measure. So I'm a little less cynical, but yeah, it's easy to be cynical from an outsider perspective that politics is all rigged, right? You get in there and hustle, and you can make a difference.
Good. That's fantastic. Yeah, we asked that question because change is a constant. Change is the only thing that is constant, and if we don't change, things around us are going to change anyway. So it's important to grasp those things around, like, this is something that I would have once died for, and now I just don't believe that anymore. So we're capable of that. So I want to thank everyone that did tune in. I want to thank you for your time, Sam. Brian, it's a privilege and honor to be in partnership with you in this and in business as well. And for anybody that's listening, no matter where you are, just remember that somebody needs to know that you care. Somebody needs to know that they're seen. Somebody needs to know that they're heard, and somebody needs to know that they matter. I don't care how much money they make. I don't care what color their skin is. I don't care who they pray to or choose not to pray to. The things that we have in common are greater than anything that ever separates us, especially when we allow that to take place. So we have to fight to make sure that that does not. I want to make sure that I thank the women in my life, my amazing wife, Laura, and my mom, Jan. I wouldn't be able to be who I am or be who I hope to be without their support ever in life. And make sure that you tune in next week. We have our event coming up on a week from today as well. Someday is today. But again, thank you so very much. And if you're watching this, we love you.
Thank you, Shawn Hall in Hawaii. Thank you, Robert, Jordan, everybody else who's tuned in. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. And for everybody on the U.S. Virgin Islands, yeah, like, share, spread the word. We love you all. Sam, thank you again. Great conversation.
Thank you. Great work, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.